Hi everyone, today's build video is my build for JodySims Death Race 2025. This is my first time entering this event. For those unfamiliar with this event, JodySims for the past few years has hosted a death race. The idea being as fellow content creators, although it's open to anyone, can send in a Gaslands car so long as it's not a war rig, and then he will live stream a bunch of races pitting the cars against each other, head to head, with the loser forfeiting their ride to the winner, hence it's a pink slips race. For a bit of explanation of the rules, you should go and check out JodySims' video, although unfortunately by the time this video comes out it'll be quite close to the death race or in the middle of it. So when I was thinking of ideas of what kind of car I wanted to build for this event, I decided to go and build a cut and shut. It's been a while since I've done one, plus the idea is I'd get to build two, so I'd get to keep one and I'd get to send the other one off, and that way if I did lose the other car I still kind of had one as a memento. So for this I'm going to be using two Zuru Metal Machines. The blue car is a Flare and the yellow car is a White Fang. Generally the idea is when they build these cut and shuts they use the same make and model. Personally I've done a couple of cut and shuts and I like to use different vehicles. So in this case I'm using a classic muscle car and a modern muscle car. So the first thing I do after drilling out the bases to disassemble the cars is to dunk the chrome plated pieces into a jar of bleach. This will dechrome it. Off camera I'll pull these out with some pliers, and for safety reasons I'll wash them so I don't have bleach on my hands. To cut the cars in half I plan to use my jeweler's saw, and instead of doing the traditional horizontal or vertical cut, I'm doing a diagonal cut, which I'll do off camera. And here's the results of that. Now I started with a White Fang, but I made the mistake of trying to cut through the car fully assembled, but cutting through both the plastic body and the metal base at the same time affected the angle of the cut, as you can kind of see. So when I cut the other car I cut it in separate sections, and as you can see the cut in that car is much straighter. So the first thing I do is remove all the glass because I'm not going to need it, but the headlights for the flare are moulded into the glass piece, so I remove those with my sprue cutters. Next was to superglue the two different bases together. With that done I test fit the bodies and then mark out where I need to trim them so they'll fit together a lot better. I do these cuts off camera and you can see they fit much better now. So there's a bit of a gap in the roof, but that's kind of because of the two different cars. Next I plan to use some flat strips of styrene to make the brackets that hold the two bodies together. I then cut up some styrene rod to make the rivets and apply them to the car like so. For the main weapon on both cars, I plan to use this off-brand Lego M1 Garand, since I have plenty of these off-brand Lego based weapons. First I remove the stock and the trigger guard, since I really only need the barrel and the body of the gun. I plan to mount this to the hood and then dress it up a bit to hide the origins of the gun. I also plan to use some zip ties for the ammo belts. So I attach it to the hood and then off camera I play around with the layout until I'm happy with it. And here you can see the one I've done. Now on the other car I'm going to show you what I did. So use some of this flat styrene strip to make a brace for the barrel. And then cut some C-shaped styrene to make the ammo feed necks. With them installed, I cut the zip tie to length and width. And then I use my needle nose pliers to bend the ammo belt into shape. Trimming off a little excess before gluing it into place. Next, to fill the large gaps between the two different bodies, I use some of the pieces I trimmed off earlier. Moving on to the wheels, I use some Chemstyle Designs regular 14mm Tyre 10 rim 12 on the back. And regular 12mm Tyre 4 rim 3 on the front. And I do the same on the other car but in the reverse order with the size. For the axles I simply put the wheels on the wheel wells and then took some styrene rod and cut them to length. Then came the tricky process of gluing the wheels onto the axles. Sadly I'm not sure what kind of glue this is because I've got a bunch of this stuff free with a load of model starter kits I bought and I've just yet to use it, so I'm just trying to use it up and save some money. But I assume it's some kind of poly cement. After assembling both wheels onto the axle and onto the car, I leave the car alone for the glue to harden. Next I want to add some push bars to the cars using this H-shaped styrene. So I marked out and cut a piece, which I then bent into shape. and once attached I use some square styrene sprue to make the top half. Doing the same, marking, cutting and then bending into shape and gluing it on. Off camera I made another one for the other car. And then add mesh to the front windshields. Cutting out a rectangle piece, roughly the right size. And then after a quick test fit, making a few adjustments. And once I'm happy, I glue this into place. And again, do the same thing for the other car. Moving on, I want to add some spoilers to the car. So I started with some H-shaped styrene to make the supports, marking and cutting them to the correct length. I also cut a notch into them so that the spoiler would sit at the correct angle. Once the supports were glued into place, I used another piece of flat styrene strip for the actual spoiler. For the other car, I decided I was going to go with a Daytona style spoiler. This one was a lot simpler, I just bent it into shape and then glued it on the back. So at this point in the build, I decided I was going to go with a verni sponsor, given that the Frankenstein nature of the vehicles and Verni's own Frankenstein nature of their vehicles, it just seemed to match. I was also a little puzzled on what to do for a rear mounted weapon, but after looking for the rules for this verni sponsor, I found they had the tombstone perk, so it made sense just to add a tombstone to these vehicles. So I measured out the rear ends. And drew out and cut a rectangle on some much thicker 3mm styrene. Anyway, with the rectangles cut out, I test fit them to make sure they'll fit flush to the back of the cars. After the test fit, I decided to remove the bumper from the flare back end, just so it'll fit flush. Unfortunately, I can't do the same for the white fang back end because if I remove the rear bumper, I would lose half the car. With the rear bumper now removed, I can glue the tombstone on. Off camera, I add some braces with some bolts and show how it's attached to the back of the car. Obviously do the same for the other car as well. Now on to the drivers, and for this I'm going to be using a 172 scale World War II German driver by 3DS Jason. And for the other car I'm going to be using a 172 scale World War II Italian driver, also by 3D Jasons. For the crew figures, I'm using some leftover figures from the Ramshackle Games 20mm conversion set. These are just regular crew figures. There was no need for crew figures, but I just kind of felt that it would make sense to add some crew figures in. Like usual, when I use these 172 scale drivers, it's obvious I'm going to have to remove the legs so that I can fit the guy in. After a quick test fit, he sits too high, so I remove the base of the seat. As you can see, after another test fit, he fits perfectly without his head smashing against the roof. But he does need to sit a little further forward so his hands are kind of touching the steering wheel. I then glued the two halves of the interior piece together. And strengthened the joint with some baking soda and super glue. Still needing the driver to sit further forward, I removed the back of the seat and just positioned that a bit further forward. Followed by gluing in the driver and the passenger. Off camera, I pretty much did the same thing for the crew of the other car. Though I didn't realise it yet, I made a bit of a mistake with the passenger on the second car, where he sits a bit too far forward and his head's kind of pushed up against the mesh windshield, but you'll see that later on in the build. Going back to the guns, I decided I wanted to add a barrel shroud, like this one, which I've already made. To make this, I started with some styrene tube and then use a drawing pen to add all the little vent holes. It was easier to do this before cutting this to the correct length, so I had something to hold onto whilst I was poking in the little holes. Once I was happy with it, I cut this to the same length of the barrel on the gun. Then split it down the middle so I could slot it over the gun. Which was a bit fiddly, as you can see here. Next I use some more of this flat styrene strip just to dress the gun up a bit more and make it look less like a cut down M1 Garand. Moving on to the battle damage, I started with a file and just carved some dents into the bodywork, which is a lot easier on these Zuru Metal Machines since their bodies are mostly plastic. Following this, I used my hobby knife to carve out some bullet holes in both the bodies and the tombstones. Onto the paint, I decided I was going to keep the car's original colours, so I start with a homemade metallic blue. I then prime the yellow half with some Revell Aquacolor Stone Grey, which I follow up with some Revell Aquacolor Lufthansa Yellow. For the exposed metal part, I apply a base coat of Revell Aquacolor Rust. I then go over the top of this with a dry brushing of Revell Aquacolor Aluminium or Revell Aquacolor Steel. Off camera I skip ahead and paint all the little details such as the drivers and the headlights and such, just to cut down the painting time. I don't really do anything special, so it's pointless just wasting your time here. And then finally I finish it all off with my homemade black wash, just to blend everything together and give it that nice dirty wasteland look. And for a final touch I paint a V for Verni on the doors. Now I'm still kind of experimenting what I'm going to go for with logos. So for this one I just painted a purple V with a white highlight around it, so it would stand out more against the body colour. Again, I may change this logo in the future, and to be honest, thinking of it, since I was going to send one of these cars off, it was probably best not to have put the logo on, but I wasn't thinking. So unfortunately, whoever wins this car in the death race, I'm sorry that it's got this horrible painted logo on it. Unfortunately, it was one of those ideas that sounded good at the time. Now I'm kind of thinking about it and thinking maybe I shouldn't have done that, but you know, hey-oh, that's how things go sometimes. Anyhow, I think both cars turned out awesomely. So apologies for this video taking forever to get out. The original plan was to get this out before the death race, but now it's coming out halfway through the death race. If you've watched the death race already, you know I sent the car with the Daytona spoiler to Jody for the death race. So the first 2 rounds of the death race have already concluded. I won the first race. Unfortunately I got eliminated in the second, even after some Dukes of Hazzard level stuff. So it's definitely worth a watch and go It's definitely worth a watch and going over to Jody's channel and watching the 2 death races. He's yet to do a third one for everyone who won the first 2 rounds. So please go over to Jody's channel and check out the carnage on the 2 previous death races that have already been run. So go ahead and check out the death races that have already occurred. So go ahead and check out the death race on Jody's channel. There's definitely another race coming for all the people who won the first 2 rounds. You know, although you can't catch the action live, the replays. As usual, please stick around for my usual glamour shots and short animation. And I'll see you all and I hope you've all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.